Snow kept falling outside, covering the ground in a thick white layer. The wind howled around the corners of the small wooden house, shaking the old windows. Jack sat in his chair by the fire, reading an old book. The warmth of the flames kept the cold away, and the only sounds were the crackle of burning wood and the whistle of the wind. He was used to long winter nights alone, but tonight something felt different. There was a strange tension in the air, like the quiet before a storm. A faint sound broke through the wind. It wasn't the creak of the house or the groan of the old wood. It was sharper, like metal touching metal. Jack froze, his eyes lifting from the book. There it was again. Click. He slowly placed the book down on the table and reached for the hunting knife beside his chair. The sound had come from the back of the house, near the kitchen door. He moved quietly, his boots silent on the wooden floor. His soldier's instincts made his steps careful and slow. When he reached the kitchen, the cold hit him first. The back door was half open, and snow was blowing in with the wind. The lock was damaged. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, and that's when he saw the shape. A small figure crouched near the shelves, shivering. Her skin had a faint blue tint, and lines of soft, glowing light ran along her neck and arms. Her clothes were thin, torn in many places, and frost clung to her hair. She was holding something from his cupboard, a bag of bread, but her hands shook so badly she could barely grip it. Jack stepped forward, the knife in his hand. "Who are you?" he demanded. The figure gasped, spinning to face him. She had large, luminous eyes, the color of ice under sunlight. Her lips trembled as she looked at the knife. But instead of running or attacking, she dropped the bread and whispered in a broken voice, "I can cook. Bear your children. Just don't throw me out." For a moment, Jack just stared. The words made no sense. Her accent was strange, and she spoke slowly, as if each word cost her strength. She swayed on her knees, almost falling over. Her breathing was shallow, her lips pale. Jack realized with a shock that she was freezing to death. He glanced at the open door. Snow had blown halfway across the kitchen floor. If he pushed her out now, she wouldn't last more than a few minutes. Still, he didn't lower the knife. "You're not from here," he said. She shook her head, eyes still fixed on the floor. "I have nowhere else. Please." Her voice was hoarse, almost gone. Jack's grip on the knife tightened. Something about her wasn't right. Those glowing lines under her skin, the strange way she moved, the odd offer she had made. He had seen enough during his years as a soldier to know she wasn't human. And yet, her thin arms and the way her shoulders curled in made her look fragile, almost breakable. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out, and she collapsed against the cupboard. Jack cursed under his breath. Without thinking, he grabbed her arm. It was ice cold, like touching frozen metal, and pulled her to her feet. She was lighter than he expected, and her body shook violently. He guided her toward the fireplace in the living room. The moment the heat touched her skin, she let out a small, unsteady sigh. Jack set her down on the rug, keeping the knife nearby. She sat very still, eyes lowered, as if afraid to move without permission. Her hands were so cold they looked almost blue. Jack poured her a cup of hot water and pushed it toward her. She hesitated, then took it in both hands. Steam curled up into her face, and she closed her eyes, inhaling deeply before sipping. The glow under her skin flickered faintly, like dying embers coming back to life. For a while, neither spoke. The firelight flickered over her face, revealing sharp cheekbones and small scars along her jaw. Her eyes darted to the door every few seconds, as if expecting someone to burst in. Finally, Jack asked, "What's your name?" She shook her head. Not safe to say. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge of fear in it. "You broke into my home," Jack said. "You owe me the truth." Her gaze lifted slowly to meet his. "I can't go back," she said. "They'll find me if I stay outside. Please, let me stay here. I'll work, cook, clean, anything you want." Jack's jaw tightened. He didn't like strangers, and he definitely didn't like being dragged into someone else's trouble. But looking at her, so thin, so cold, so desperate, he knew if he threw her out, she'd die before morning. He leaned back in his chair, the knife still in his hand. "You'll stay here tonight," he said finally. "Tomorrow, we talk again." Her shoulders sagged in relief. She set the empty cup down and curled closer to the fire, as if trying to melt the frost from her bones. Jack watched her in silence. Something deep in his gut told him this was the start of trouble, trouble that might follow him for a long time. But it was already too late. She was inside his home now, and she had nowhere else to go. Jack sat at the table the next morning, staring at the small fire that was slowly burning down. The smell of food drifted through the air. It was strange because he hadn't cooked anything. When he walked into the kitchen, he found her standing there, moving slowly but with careful hands. She was using his pans and bowls, but she had also taken out a small pouch from her torn clothes. From it, she poured a glowing powder into the pot. The smell was rich, warm, unlike anything he had smelled before. She glanced at him quickly when she heard his footsteps, then looked down again as if afraid to hold his gaze. "Breakfast," she murmured. Her voice was still rough, but it was stronger than last night. Jack leaned against the doorway, crossing his arms. "You didn't ask. You let me stay. I repay you," she said simply. There was no smile on her face, no friendly expression, just a serious, almost nervous look. When the food was ready, she set a bowl in front of him. Jack hesitated but took a bite. The taste was unlike anything he had eaten before. Savory, slightly sweet, with a strange heat that spread through his chest. It felt like it was warming him from the inside. "What is this?" he asked. "A dish from my home," she replied softly. "The powder is mine. It helps the body heal." Jack studied her for a moment. She seemed to be moving better now, though he could see her hands were still trembling. "Where is your home?" he asked. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Far. Too far. I can't go back." He set the spoon down. "You're going to have to tell me more than that." She shook her head quickly, her eyes flicking to the windows as if someone could be watching. "If I tell you, you will throw me out." Jack frowned. "You broke into my home, you were half dead, and you offered strange things in exchange for staying here. You think I'm not already suspicious?" Her gaze lowered again. "I am not like you. My people, they follow old rules. If a female enters a male's home, she becomes his unless he rejects her. I do not want to belong to the one who owned me before." Jack blinked. "Owned you?" She nodded once, her face tightening. "I escaped. They will come for me." For a moment, the room was silent, except for the quiet hiss of the fire in the kitchen stove. Jack watched her as she moved to clean the dishes. Her movements fast and careful, as though she wanted to make herself useful before he could change his mind about keeping her there. When she reached for the broom, he stepped forward. "Stop. Sit down." She froze, then slowly obeyed, sitting on the edge of the chair like she was ready to run at any second. "You think you can just stay here and they won't find you?" Jack asked. Her hands gripped the sides of the chair. "Maybe they will, but if they find me outside, I will die. If I am here, maybe you can hide me. You have walls, warmth, weapons. I have nothing." Jack looked at her thin frame, the way her eyes darted to the door every few seconds, the way her shoulders stayed tense. She was telling the truth, at least about being hunted. "And what do you give me in return?" he asked, his voice low. She met his eyes then, and for the first time, there was a flicker of defiance in them. "I already told you. I can cook, I can clean, I can be what you want. But I will not leave, not unless you throw me out yourself." Jack turned away, rubbing his hand over his face. This was trouble. He knew it. He had spent years avoiding the fights of other people, especially those not from his world. Yet somehow, he had let this one in. She stood slowly, moving back toward the stove. "You should eat more," she said quietly. "You will need your strength." He glanced at her. "Why?" Her eyes darkened, and her voice dropped even lower. "Because they will not stop looking for me, and when they come, they will not knock." Jack didn't answer. He went back to the table and finished the strange, glowing food. It was too good to waste, and besides, something in it made him feel sharper, more awake. Later, as the day went on, he kept catching her glancing at the door and windows. Every sound outside made her flinch. She stayed close to the kitchen, keeping the fire going, making small repairs to his old pans without asking. It was like she wanted to show him she was worth the risk of keeping her here. But even with the warmth of the house and the firelight, Jack could feel a cold creeping into his thoughts. If what she said was true, it wasn't just her life on the line anymore. If they came for her, they would have no problem killing him too. And the worst part was, he could see in her eyes that she already knew this. The morning light came weak through the small window, touching the frost on the glass. Jack woke to a soft clatter in the kitchen. The smell of food reached him before he even sat up. It was richer than yesterday, almost sweet, with a faint sharpness in the air. He stood and walked in, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. She was there again, moving around his kitchen like she had lived there for years. But her movements were strange, too precise, almost silent. She stirred a pot with slow, steady circles, and once again he saw her pour that glowing powder from her pouch into the food. The light from it faded quickly, leaving only the steam. She noticed him and stopped stirring for a moment. "You wake early," she said softly. "You're in my kitchen," he replied, leaning on the doorway. "And you're using things I didn't give you permission to use." Her head tilted slightly, like she didn't understand. "I must cook for the one whose home I stay in. It is our way." Jack stepped closer. "Your way isn't my way, and I still don't know who you are." Her eyes flicked up to his for the briefest second before lowering again. "Lyra," she said finally. "My name is Lyra." He repeated it under his breath. "Lyra, where are you from?" Her lips pressed together, and she shook her head. "Far away, a place I cannot return to." Jack poured himself a cup of water, watching her. "You keep saying that, but you still haven't told me why." She was silent for a while, moving to ladle food into bowls. "My people follow rules," she said at last. "Rules that are older than the stars. If a female steps into a male's home, she belongs to him. If he rejects her, she is cast out forever. I cannot go back to the one I left, so I stay here, unless you tell me to leave." Jack frowned. "And if I do?" Her hands tightened on the ladle. "Then I will die." She said it simply, like it was not a question or fear, just a fact. Jack took the bowl from her and sat at the table. The food was better than anything he'd eaten in months. He wanted to ask more questions, but the way she spoke made it clear there were things she would not tell him yet. For a time, they ate in silence. The only sound was the wind outside and the soft crackle of the fire. But Jack noticed something. Every few minutes, Lyra's eyes darted to the door, then to the window, then back to her food. Her shoulders were tight, as if she expected something to happen. Finally, he set his spoon down. "You keep looking outside. What are you expecting?" Her head lowered, but her voice was tense. "They will come for me. They always come." Jack leaned back in his chair. "Who?" Her lips moved like she was about to answer, but she stopped suddenly, her eyes fixed on the window. Jack turned his head and saw nothing at first, just snow falling over the frozen ground. Then he heard it. Crunching footsteps, slow, heavy, getting closer. Lyra's breathing changed, shallow and fast. Her hands gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned pale. Jack stood, moving to the side of the window. He pulled the curtain back just enough to see. Two tall figures in dark, armored suits moved through the snow. Their helmets reflected the pale light, and in their hands were weapons unlike anything he had seen before. They moved with the calm confidence of hunters. "They've found me," Lyra whispered. Jack dropped the curtain. "You didn't tell me they were already this close." "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "They can track scent, heat, memory. They are not supposed to find me so soon." Jack grabbed his coat and reached for the old rifle hanging on the wall. He hadn't planned for this. He had thought he had days, maybe weeks, before trouble came. Now, it was here. The sound of boots on snow stopped outside the door. A knock came, heavy, slow, deliberate. Lyra's hands were trembling now. She shook her head at him, eyes wide. "Don't answer." Jack stepped toward the door anyway, his rifle ready. "If I don't, they'll come in anyway." The knock came again, harder. A deep voice, muffled through the helmet, spoke in a language Jack didn't know. The tone was commanding, certain. "They're asking to search," Lyra whispered. Jack took a slow breath. "You understand them?" "Yes," she said. "They are saying they followed my trail to this place." Jack tightened his grip on the rifle. "Then we give them nothing." He opened the door a crack, enough to meet the visor of the nearest hunter. "You've got the wrong place," Jack said firmly. The hunter tilted his head, scanning the inside of the house with some kind of device. "Open fully," the voice commanded. "No," Jack said and started to close the door. The second hunter stepped forward quickly, trying to push it open. Jack slammed his shoulder into it and forced it shut with a sharp thud, throwing the lock into place. There was a pause outside, then the sound of snow crunching as the hunters moved away. Lyra was staring at him, her mouth slightly open. "You didn't give me up," she said softly, as if she couldn't quite believe it. Jack looked at her for a moment, then put the rifle back on the wall. You're inside my home. That means you're under my roof. No one drags you out of here without going through me. Her eyes softened, but fear still lingered there. Then you have made yourself their enemy too. Jack gave a small shrug. Wouldn't be the first time. But deep down, he knew this was different. This wasn't a fight he had chosen, but now he was in it. And the enemy had already found his door. The snow outside was falling harder now, covering the hunters' tracks almost as fast as they were made. Jack stayed near the door, listening for any sound that might mean they were still close. The wind whistled around the edges of the house, but beneath it, he thought he could still hear faint movement in the distance. Lyra hadn't moved from the table. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, her hands clenched tightly together in her lap. She looked like someone waiting for a sentence to be passed, knowing it would not be in her favor. "They'll come back," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack turned to face her. "Then we'll be ready for them." She shook her head quickly. "You don't understand. They don't give up. Once they've marked someone, they will follow until they have them. If they have to burn this house to the ground to get me, they will." Jack walked to the window and moved the curtain slightly. Far out, through the veil of snow, he saw two tall shapes still moving among the trees. They hadn't gone far. They were circling, watching. "Then you'll stay away from the windows," he said, "and you won't open the door for anyone." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. For the rest of the afternoon, they stayed quiet. Jack kept his rifle close, checking the bullets, making sure the fire stayed strong. Lyra busied herself with small tasks, mending a tear in her sleeve, sorting through the few supplies in the cupboard, but her ears seemed to twitch at every noise outside, her head turning sharply whenever the wind changed. As the light began to fade, Jack moved to close the shutters. He had just secured the last one when a dull thud came from the side of the house. He froze. Another thud followed, heavier this time, like someone testing the walls. Jack signaled for Lyra to stay still and crept to the corner. The sound came again, closer now, scraping against the wood. Without warning, the back door handle rattled. The lock held, but the shaking grew harder. Jack rushed to the kitchen, rifle ready, and shouted, "Get away from my house!" The movement stopped for a moment. Then a low voice came from the other side of the door, speaking in the same alien language as before. Jack glanced at Lyra. "They say they know I'm inside," she whispered. "They say they will take me without hurting you if I come out now." Jack let out a sharp laugh. "Yeah, I'm sure they'll keep that promise." Lyra stood slowly, her face pale, but her jaw tight. "If I go, they will leave you alone." Jack stepped toward her, his voice hard. Not an option. Her eyes searched his face, as if trying to understand why he was protecting her at all. "Then you are putting yourself in danger for nothing. You don't even know me." "Don't need to," he said simply. "I'm not handing someone over to people like that." The door rattled harder, and then there was a loud metallic bang. One of the hunters had struck it with something heavy. The frame shuddered, but it held. For now. Jack raised his rifle. "If they break it down, I shoot." Lyra's gaze moved to the door, then back to him. "If you fight them, you will be hunted too. Your face will be known to them." "Guess I'll have to get used to that," he said. The banging stopped. Silence pressed against the walls for several seconds, broken only by the hiss of the fire. Then, faintly, the crunch of footsteps came again, moving away from the house. "They're leaving," Lyra murmured. Jack kept the rifle raised. "No, they're repositioning." For nearly an hour, they didn't speak. Every sound from outside kept their nerves on edge. Once a shadow passed the window, tall and narrow, but it didn't stop. The hunters seemed to be testing the house, half checking for weaknesses. Finally, when the darkness outside was complete, the noises faded. Lyra let out a slow, shaky breath, her shoulders sinking. "You've made yourself my enemy," she said quietly. Jack frowned. "What?" "By protecting me, you've taken their hatred. In their eyes, you are now the one who stole their property. That is a crime they do not forgive." He set the rifle down but didn't let go of it. "Good thing I'm not looking for their forgiveness." Her eyes lingered on him for a long moment, as if memorizing his face. There was still fear in her expression, but also something else, a spark of trust, fragile but growing. "You are the only one between me and them now," she said. Jack didn't answer. He went to add more wood to the fire. the glow lighting the edges of the room. Outside, the wind carried away the sound of retreating footsteps. But deep down, he knew this was not the end. It was only the pause before the real fight. The fire burned low, casting a soft orange light across the small room. Lyra sat on the floor near the hearth, her legs pulled close to her chest, staring into the flames. Jack was at the table, cleaning his rifle piece by piece. Neither of them had spoken for a long time, but the weight of what had happened still hung in the air. Finally, Lyra's voice broke the silence. "Do you want to know why they're after me?" Jack looked up from the rifle. "I figured it wasn't because you forgot to pay your taxes." Her lips twitched faintly, but there was no humor in her eyes. She shifted closer to the fire, her voice low. "I was chosen for breeding. My people choose certain females for their strongest clans. We are kept, fed, trained in certain ways. Then, when the time comes, we are given to a male to produce children. Many, until we can no longer." Jack's hand stilled over the rifle barrel. "Sounds more like slavery." She nodded once. "It is, but they don't call it that. They call it honor." Jack's jaw tightened. "So you ran." Her gaze drifted toward the door. "I ran before the first night, before they marked me as bonded. If that happens, I belong to them until death. I would rather die free." For a moment, the only sound was the fire crackling. Jack leaned back in his chair. "And you came here? To me?" Her eyes lowered. "I was cold, hungry, and I knew human homes were guarded. Your kind doesn't give up property easily. I thought maybe, if I stepped inside, you would keep me." Jack studied her. "You think I own you now?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "But in their eyes, yes. If you keep me, they cannot take me without challenging you. That is why they haven't already stormed in." Jack set the rifle aside. "You're saying I'm part of their game now?" "Yes," she whispered. "You have a choice. You can give me to them and be left alone, or you can keep me and fight until one of us is gone." Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That's not a choice. I'm not handing you over to anyone." Her breath caught slightly, and for a second her eyes shone with something almost like relief. She moved closer to the fire, holding her hands out to the warmth. "Then I will repay you." He raised an eyebrow. "With what? More strange cooking?" She looked at him seriously. "With the life bond." Jack frowned. "The what?" She hesitated, then explained. "It is the strongest promise of my people. If I give it, my life is tied to yours. I serve, protect, and share everything I have with you. It is more than marriage. It cannot be broken." Jack leaned back, unsure what to say. "Sounds heavy." "It is," she said. "It is also the only thing I can offer that is worth the risk you are taking." He didn't answer right away. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls, and somewhere far in the distance, a howl echoed through the snow. "You don't have to make promises," Jack said finally. "You just have to stay alive." She studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "I will, but you should know, when they come again, it will not be to talk." Jack smirked faintly. "Good thing I'm better with action than talking." The rest of the evening passed in quiet. Lyra prepared a small meal, the glow from her strange powder mixing with the firelight, making the room feel warmer than it should have. Jack couldn't help but notice how her shoulders seemed a little less tense now, though her eyes still flickered to the windows from time to time. Later, as Jack added more wood to the fire, she spoke again. "In spring, the snow will melt. Travel will be easier. If we make it that far, I can take you to a place where their law has no power. There, they cannot touch me, or you." Jack nodded slowly. "Then spring is our goal." She looked at him, her voice steady. "Spring or death?" Jack met her gaze and didn't flinch. "Then we survive." That night, as the wind howled outside and the snow piled higher against the door, Lyra lay near the fire with her eyes half closed. Jack sat in his chair, rifle within reach, watching the shadows move across the walls. He knew the hunters weren't gone. He could feel it in his bones. Somewhere out there in the dark they were waiting. And now, they weren't just after her. They were after both of them. The days passed slowly, each one colder than the last. The snow outside was deep now, almost burying the lower part of the windows. Jack kept the fire going day and night, but the chill still found its way into the walls. Lyra stayed close to the hearth, her thin clothes no match for the biting winter air. For a while, it was quiet. Too quiet. Jack knew silence could be dangerous. It often meant something was building in the dark. Lyra seemed to feel it too. She spoke little, her eyes always flicking toward the door whenever the wind changed. One morning, just as the pale sun touched the trees, Jack was checking the traps he had set outside. The snow crunched under his boots, the air sharp in his lungs. He had gone no more than 20 steps from the house when he saw it. A set of footprints, larger than his own, half filled with fresh snow. They came from the forest and stopped just a few paces from the back of his house. He crouched down, touching the edge of one print. The snow inside was only lightly frozen. Whoever had been here came during the night. Jack returned inside, his jaw tight. Lyra was by the fire, stirring something in the pot. She looked up at his face and froze. "They're here," she whispered. "They were," Jack said, setting his rifle on the table. "Close. Too close." She put the spoon down, her hands trembling. They will not wait much longer. That night, the attack came. It started with a sound like the wind, but heavier, more deliberate. Jack was by the window when he saw them, 3 figures in dark armor moving silently across the snow. Their helmets glowed faintly, their weapons ready. "Lyra," he said, his voice low, "get away from the windows." She moved instantly, crouching near the far wall. Jack took position by the door, his rifle in hand, waiting. The first shot came through the window, shattering the glass and sending a burst of cold air into the room. He fired back without hesitation, the crack of his rifle echoing through the frozen night. The hunters moved fast, circling the house. Jack could hear their boots thudding against the snow, the low hum of their strange weapons charging. One of them tried the back door, slamming into it hard enough to rattle the frame. "Upstairs!" Jack barked. Lyra ran for the narrow staircase, her bare feet light on the steps. He followed after firing 2 more shots, forcing the hunters to take cover. They reached the small upper room just as the front door burst open below. Heavy footsteps entered, the sound of armor scraping against wood. Lyra's breathing was quick, her eyes wide. Jack moved to the small window, opened it, and pointed to the thick snowdrift just beneath. "Jump," he said. She stared at him. "What?" "Jump. I'll be right behind you." Without arguing further, she climbed onto the sill and leapt. The snow swallowed her, soft but deep. Jack fired one last shot toward the stairs, then followed, landing hard beside her. They ran. The forest was dark, the snow deep, and the cold cut at their skin like knives. Behind them, voices shouted in that alien language, the hunters giving chase. Lyra led the way, her movements strange but swift, as if she knew how to move over snow without sinking too much. Jack kept close. His rifle ready, though, he knew he couldn't waste shots blindly in the dark. They reached an old cabin, its roof half collapsed, hidden among the trees. Lyra ducked inside first, and Jack followed, pulling the rotten door shut behind them. "They will find us," she said, pressing her back to the wall. "Not if we make it hard for them." Jack scanned the room, spotting old tools, rusted but still useful. He grabbed a length of wire and a cracked hunting spear. "Help me set traps." Lyra didn't hesitate. She moved quickly, weaving the wire between the doorframe and a loose beam. Then she took a handful of small glowing stones from her pouch and placed them near the window. "Step on these," she explained, "and they release heat and light. It will blind them for a few seconds." They worked fast. The sounds of pursuit grew louder outside. Branches snapping, snow crunching under heavy boots. Jack crouched near the door, rifle ready, while Lyra hid behind a broken table. The first hunter appeared in the doorway. Jack waited until the wire trap caught his leg, pulling him off balance, then fired. The shot hit hard, sending the alien crashing into the snow outside. But another was already at the window, raising his weapon. Lyra threw one of her glowing stones, and it burst in a flash of searing light. The hunter staggered back, cursing in his language, and Jack took the chance to fire again. The third one entered from the side wall, breaking through the rotten boards. He was fast, too fast. Jack barely had time to swing his rifle before the alien slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. The rifle clattered away, out of reach. Lyra moved without thinking. She grabbed the old spear and drove it into the hunter's side. The alien roared, grabbing at the shaft, but she twisted it hard, forcing him to drop his weapon. Jack rolled to his feet and punched the alien square in the helmet, sending him stumbling back through the broken wall. The night went silent again, except for their heavy breathing. The hunters had retreated, for now. Jack leaned against the wall, wincing from a bruise forming along his ribs. "You fight better than you cook," he said, his voice strained, but with a faint grin. Lyra dropped the spear, her hands shaking. I fight because I must, not because I want to. Jack looked at her seriously. Then let's make sure you won't have to again. She nodded slowly, though both of them knew the truth. The hunters would be back, and next time they might not run. The snow was beginning to soften. Days were still cold, but there were moments when the wind grew gentle and drops of water fell from the edges of the roof. Winter was ending. Jack stood outside, leaning on his rifle, scanning the tree line. He hadn't seen the hunters in over a week. That didn't mean they were gone. It only meant they were waiting. Inside, Lyra was stirring a pot over the fire. The smell of her cooking filled the small cabin, richer now that she had more supplies. She had found ways to use the human food with her alien spices, creating dishes that warmed both the body and the spirit. Her movements were calmer now, her shoulders no longer stiff with constant fear. But whenever she heard a strange sound outside, her eyes still flicked to the door. Jack came in, stamping snow off his boots. The traps are clear, no sign of them. They will not follow when the snow melts, she said, glancing up at him. Their kind does not like open ground, too easy to be seen. That works in our favor, Jack replied, setting the rifle by the wall. Once the pass opens, we move. Lyra nodded, but there was a trace of sadness in her eyes. Move where? Jack shrugged. You said there's a place where their laws don't reach. That's where we'll go. She looked at him for a moment, then went back to stirring the pot. It is far, weeks of travel, and it is not like here. You may not like it. He gave a small smile. I'm already not too fond of here. That night, the air felt different. It was quiet, too quiet. Jack sat by the fire, cleaning his rifle, while Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, her hands resting in her lap. Suddenly, she lifted her head, her eyes narrowing. They're here. Jack set the rifle down slowly. How do you know? I can feel them, she whispered. They are close. This time they will not leave without trying to take me. He rose to his feet, loading the rifle with steady hands. Then this is the last time. The first sound came from the roof, soft but heavy, like snow shifting under a weight. Jack moved to the center of the room, scanning the ceiling. Lyra stood behind him, her hands glowing faintly as she reached into her pouch for the last of her powder. A crash shattered the silence. One of the hunters dropped from the roof into the snow outside the door, kicking it open with brutal force. Jack fired instantly, the shot slamming into the hunter's shoulder, spinning him sideways. Another burst through the back wall, splinters flying across the room. Lyra hurled a handful of powder into the air. It ignited in a sudden flash of blue light, filling the room with a burning glow. The hunters hesitated, their helmets' visors reacting to the glare. Jack took the opening, firing twice more. One hunter fell, his armor sparking as he hit the ground. The third lunged for Lyra. She moved back quickly, but he grabbed her wrist. She cried out, struggling against his grip. Jack swung the butt of his rifle into the hunter's head, the impact ringing out like a hammer on metal. The hunter staggered, but didn't let go. Without thinking, Lyra did something Jack had never seen. The glowing lines under her skin flared bright, and heat radiated from her palm into the hunter's arm. Smoke rose from his armor. He released her with a snarl. Stumbling backward toward the door, Jack fired one last time, and the hunter collapsed in the snow, unmoving. Silence returned, broken only by Lyra's uneven breathing. She sank to the floor, her hands trembling. Jack knelt beside her. You all right? She nodded weakly. It is done. They will not send more. Not for me. Jack looked at the fallen hunters outside. He didn't know if she was right, but he hoped she was. Then we leave at first light. Morning came with a pale, thin sun. Jack packed supplies while Lyra wrapped herself in a heavier coat he had found. The snow was melting in patches, revealing the dark earth beneath. Before they left, she paused by the fire, placing her hand over the warm stones. This was the first place I felt safe, she said quietly, even if I was afraid every day. Jack glanced at her. You're still safe, just not here anymore. They stepped outside together, the cold air biting but no longer cruel. The forest seemed different now, less like a prison and more like a road leading somewhere new. As they walked away from the cabin, Lyra moved closer to him, her steps light but steady. You kept me alive, she said. Now I keep my promise. He looked at her, remembering her words from weeks ago. The life bond? She nodded. From this day until my last. Jack didn't fully understand her customs, but he understood loyalty. He gave her a small nod. Then we walked together. The snow crunched under their boots, the cabin disappearing behind them. Ahead, the land opened, the mountains waiting in the distance. And though danger might still be out there, they were no longer alone. They had survived the winter. Now, whatever came next, they would face it side by side.